Sam is now a new product development analyst at Puget Sound Energy, but his professional expertise has brought him as far as Myanmar, working on infrastructure and agricultural business. Another thing about Sam that he did not mention in his bio, but I think was very cool, is that he's one of the 2 outstanding graduates of his graduating master's class. So we're very lucky to hear from him. And today he's going to share with us his research on climate risk and policy. So let's give it up for Sam.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. My name is Sam, and I'm here to talk about climate risk and policy as soon as I figure out which way this clicker goes. There we go. Let's move over a little bit. So, world's getting hotter. I think most of us know that. And we know the actions we take are going to affect which future we end up in. The question is, even though the climate's changing, our system isn't changing or not changing fast enough. Why is this? I would argue it has to do with the way we structured our political economy, especially the way we optimized our political economy and our systems around shareholder value and a lot of other similar challenges. To understand how to change this, I think we need to look at feedback loops, and I think we need to look at climate risk. When I talk about climate risk, I'm going to talk about it in 2 categories. One is physical risk, which is what you probably think of when you think of climate risk. Hurricanes, droughts, wildfires, long-term heat increase. The second category, though, is transition risk. Transition risk refers to what is the risk to your community, organization, business, or whole economy from the transition to a decarbonized state. You normally measure transition risk through emissions, and the goal of reducing transition risk is to reduce your emissions. A helpful way to think about this is if we plot this on XY axis with transition risk on the Y, physical risk on the X, the worst world we live in, or we could end up living in, is the 1-1 world in the top right, where we have a disorderly, messy transition and we have really high physical impacts. The best world to live in is the 0-0 world down at the bottom, where we have a systematic, orderly transition and are able to mitigate or deal with the worst of the physical impacts. I think this framework is really important. This graphic is from the Network for Green Financial Systems, which is a collection of central banks. And these are a lot of the frameworks that regulators, banks, and other financial groups are using when they look at how we understand climate risk in our economy. This was a focus in my research at the UW, where I looked a lot at where this is going to hit the economy first and why these feedback loops are delayed, especially looking at insurance, real estate, utilities, and energy. And the core thought that I want everyone to have as we think about these things is a lot of these debates come down to who pays for what when, and how can we accelerate some of these feedback loops ahead of the impacts of climate. And the model I want us to think about is this loop, starting with a lot of ideas people have in places like this, as well as lawsuits, activism, all this energy, turning that into policy and structural, which is then implemented, and how climate risk can drive and accelerate this. What does this look like? In Washington State, we had decades of action from a wide spectrum of groups trying different things. And after a lot of energy and effort, we pulled off the Clean Energy Transformation Act in 2019, which is going to profoundly change how energy politics work, and the Climate Commitment Act this year, which is going to work to restructure a lot of Washington's political economy and work to ideally push us to that 0-0 world. As we implement this then, we are now seeing these debates come up over who pays for what when and how this money should be used. And ideally, as these are pushed forward, they open up opportunities for people to push things even further. And this is happening both at the global level with a lot of initiatives in Europe, as well as financial reforms, at the national level in the US with the IRA. California just passed a really interesting law around requiring disclosure of risk. And in Washington State, we are now seeing this really come to a head with the debate over, as the Climate Commitment Act moves forward, how to pay for it and who pays. And I think it's important to think about who gets left out of these conversations and where the costs and impacts come. I encourage everyone to read up on sacrifice zones, both in the US and abroad, because I think these are going to get a lot more intense. I'm a fan of the systems in this book, where I think it does a good job portraying how bad things could get in that 1-1 world. And if you're interested, there's a lot of links in the appendix to my talk on this. What you should take away from this is we need to finish dealing with neoliberalism. We have to look at how we can understand these process changes, how we can drive these feedback loops, and look at how, just as in Washington State, we learned from California, others can learn from what we're going through now, which means the action that we take in our state and in our communities today can have profound implications across the US and across the world. Thank you.